It's time for the Daily Planet podcast show. So sit back, relax, and give us a go. Scott and Matt and maybe a guest have undertaken an epic pod quest. We're gonna ramble on about movies and books and television and directors and film festivals and this really long list of stuff that I know nothing about, but they gave it to me and they really wanted me to read through it. And that's all I can really say about it, but it's gonna be great. Okay, start the show.
Hello and welcome to the Daily Planet podcast, your weekly podcast for all things movies, TV, books, and anything else we feel like talking about. My name is Scott Daly, and I am joined by my co-host, Matt Freeman. Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, Scott. How are you?
I'm great. We're running late today. I was rushing home from some short film stuff I was doing. Mental note for all the actors out there, don't arrive 45 minutes late to a casting call, because you're not going to get the part.
Yeah, that sounds like a good tip. I'll keep that in mind.
And we, today, Matt, is Kryptonian Collection time. It's been a whole month. And you missed the last one, so I'm sure you're excited to be back on the council.
Yes, I am. I'm very curious about how things are going to turn out today.
Me too. Also on the council, because they won last time, is Adrian. Adrian, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, of course, man. You got your film in, and now you get to insult the next person's film to keep yourself in.
Gingerly.
And that next person is my good friend and frequent Lost supporter, Chad. Chad, welcome back to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
Chad, what movie have you nominated to enter the elusive Kryptonian Collection?
Well, when you asked me initially to find a movie that I'd want to save for the end of the world, I had it down to two. After narrowing it down, it was to two very similar movies, WALL-E and Silence of the Lambs.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I thought WALL-E's great, but there's better Pixar out there, so I had to go with Silence of the Lambs. It's easily probably my top 10, if not higher. It might be top 5. But
Is it because were you worried that WALL-E was just too dark?
Yeah, I think that may have been it. I wouldn't want to watch something over and over again that makes me cry. Like there's a little more, there's more comedic beats to Silence of the Lambs, so I figure it's good. Kind of hits all the emotional points I need.
Yeah, it appeals to all ages too.
Yeah, it's one of those.
It does.
All right.
It does.
So, Chad, why don't you, for those that somehow have not seen Silence of the Lambs, which I don't know if that's possible, would you give a quick synopsis of the film and then tell me and the council why you think it's worthy?
Oh, God, a synopsis. Small town girl joins the FBI, gets asked by her boss to interview a psychopathic former psychiatrist who aided his victims to catch another psychopath who is making a lady suit out of his victims. The reason why, I think it's just one of the best shot films I've ever seen. I mean, from start to finish, it's very interestingly shot. It's very unique. I don't know if there's anything else like it, especially at the time. I didn't realize it's 25 years old at this point, which is surprising. So I'd assume a good number of your listeners might not have been alive at the time.
It's possible. 1991.
Yeah, I saw when recently rewatching it that it was made by Orion Productions, which I don't think exists anymore.
It does.
It does.
It does.
Yeah. They came back recently because I was watching. Oh God, what was it? Outlaws and Angels. I watched a couple nights ago, and it had the Orion, however you want to pronounce it, logo before it, and I was like, "Holy crap!" And I took a look, and I guess they got folded into. I want to say that it's under the MGM brand that they got folded into, basically, and they put out like 3 or 4 movies the last couple of years, but they haven't updated the logo, so it still looks exactly like it did in the 80s and 90s.
That's so funny because I think I see that logo and I think 80s. Like, that's just what I think.
It's straight up 80s.
That's crazy. Yeah, so I guess we can go around the table. Matt, I'm going to start with you because you and I have talked about this movie before. I think it was we picked our favorite Academy Award Best Picture winning movies, and I think am I remembering right? Did you pick this movie?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I was debating before this talk whether I was going to pretend that I didn't love this movie, just so that
Well,
we
I've
could
just
have
ruined
some.
it for you.
Yeah. Well, no, what I would realize is there's no way that I can plausibly pretend that, because I just gush about every aspect of it. Yeah, I mean, like Scott said, we were talking about which of the Best Pictures Academy Award-winning movies we thought was the best, and my choice was Silence of the Lambs, and I think probably agree with Chad that it's one of my top movies for a lot of different reasons. If anything, I'm interested in this talk because I want someone to challenge me on that and maybe point out some flaws or something, because that would be interesting.
Yeah, so on that note, the perfect segue, I will move over to Adrian, because I think you are going to have some things to say about this movie that aren't positive.
Yeah, well, I mean, for the most part, I'll say that the most part of things are positive. I'm trying to be as nice as I can, because and we were actually talking about this yesterday, and I felt like I was on an island unto myself with how I felt at a certain part of the movie, and and I mentioned it, and Scott's like, "Okay, you took the words exactly out of my mouth," and I was like, "Okay, good. I don't feel as alone and horrible now." But I'll completely agree with Chad that for probably 3/4 to about 80% of the movie is beautifully shot and framed, and I can't argue really about the majority of the technical aspects of the movie, and in that area it really shines and still holds up to this day.
Yeah, and I'll echo that sentiment. Um, this is the first time I've watched this film since really I started becoming obsessively observant in film technique and direction and camera placement and all that stuff. And I was like blown away by how technically impressive this movie is. Like little moments, like how the camera follows Clarice, how it shows Clarice, how it shows people around her, just the angles that are set up, how like I think that elevator scene where she steps into an elevator filled with men and they're all a good foot taller than her. Like every aspect technically of this film is remarkable. Like it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no frame of this film that isn't purposeful in how it's shot.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest part of that is how the director films conversations, because there was a whole I think we all watched a whole every frame a painting video on it because it was just excellent. But how the director uses the actor looking straight into the camera lens over and over again throughout the film to put us in Clarice's mindset. It's done with Hannibal, but it's every man that talks to her, like at some point is looking directly at the camera to talk to her, and it puts you in this totally unsettling frame of mind. You're uncomfortable. You feel like you're being leered at a little bit, and I just loved it. Like it was so great. Adrian, I mean, what do you think? I know you mentioned you love the technical stuff, but what really got to you?
For positive or negative?
No, go positive. We'll switch to the negative in a bit.
Well, no, from the positive, exactly as you were saying, just for with the fact that you have the looking into the camera is always the men, and then it usually cuts directly to Clarice, and she's slightly off center always. It's not directly on. Even if she's talking directly to the person, she's always got like a slight lean or a look that makes it feel that she's not having that direct eye contact. That's both from her state of mind and just to give that different representation. But at the same time, something that I was noticing on this go around is when they go into the flashbacks, which I forgot played such a big part as the movie's going on. Compared to most other films, they always try to make it very, I guess, overdone and let you know, hey, this is a flashback, because there's either a sound cue, there's a desaturation of the color, or a different palette is thrown on there, or there's something kind of wistful to let you know that it's now taking place in the past. Whereas in this movie, they still keep the exact same camera technique and everything, and you have to piece it together for a moment until the film lets you know that this is a flashback just through the general narration and the way the story's going, and which is just pretty mind-boggling compared to how everybody else tries to hit you over the head with it nowadays.
And I'll say, Adrian, except when Hannibal has the pin in his mouth. Other than that, he's very subtle in in the direction. There's a few kind of on the nose pieces that could have been done better.
Yeah,
I was being positive.
It's okay. I'll say that I have an issue with a few, focusing in shots, and also Jodie Foster's accent is tough to get past for me. But that might be as a Southerner, I'm very judgy on Southern accents.
It's fair. I wanted to talk about the American flag in this movie because I wanted to get you guys' opinion on it, because the American flag and the seal of the government is shown many times throughout this movie, and I couldn't figure out exactly what they were trying to say with that. And I did a lot of research online yesterday after watching this film to try to figure out what other people thought, and couldn't really, even Ebert mentions it, but he doesn't really say exactly what he thinks, what he interprets it as. So what did you guys think of the red, white, and blue imagery throughout this film? Because I think there's three separate occasions that I can think of. The car in the storage shed is draped in it. There's a flag in the window at the very end that gets shot out during the gunfight. Hannibal strings up the cop with banners of American flags to look kind of like an eagle, like the seal. So what did you guys think of that?
I would have to watch the movie again to really answer that question, but that's definitely very evocative. I assume we'll be talking about kind of other subtextual elements too, but I mean, just based on what you said, it sounds like they're conflating or mixing the idea of the United States with violence and I don't know, maybe power and violence. I'm not sure why I say that, other than that a lot of Hannibal's violence tends to be centered around domination. Yeah. I don't know. That's really interesting. It really, I mean, now that you point it out, it's very obvious, because it was in these very strategic scenes, basically, and you have the good guy as an agent of the government, and yet the government is sort of draped around all these horrible things.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is that the government is basically trying to use Hannibal as a tool. So another way of saying that is the United States is using this utter monster as a tool, and you can't do that without dirtying your hands. So, the United States is responsible for everything Hannibal does, in a sense. Just like Hannibal says at the end, any sane society would either kill him or put him to good use. And since this is a insane society, we keep him in a cage, which he then escapes from.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anything to add, Adrian or Chad?
One of the notes I jotted down in rewatching recently was I really thought it might be about the American male psyche, and how it's kind of how, and it's some American males, not the four in this conversation, but tend to be somewhat in love with themselves. And you look at Dr. Chilton's very much in love with himself, his appearance, his power. I mean, Hannibal is in love with his persona, his charm, his intellect. Yeah, I think Buffalo Bill, I don't know if he's in love with himself. I mean, he's trying to create a new version of himself that he thinks he should be, this greater version, this greater form. Jack Crawford, I mean, he's just, you don't really get much out of him. Scott Glenn is a great actor, but he doesn't get a ton to work with. So I don't know if you can say the same for him, but I think for 3 or 4 of the main characters, it's kind of them they're very busy being in love with themselves throughout the film.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of got that too, and kind of what everybody's hinting on in different ways, and what it kind of felt was I guess the facade, in a way, that not only the characters are putting up, but then just all the law enforcement positions outside of Jodie Foster's character, and then her roommate, I guess you would call her, is usually depicted by men. and with them putting up the facade of being good and brave and wanting to honor their country and everything like that, but they're all usually leering at this woman or doing things behind closed doors. It's one of those that I'd have to watch it again, and I'd also have to see where Demme was at that time, because he could have been trying to sneak in something that he felt about the government agencies and the country as a whole, and he was trying to push something in there that may have been big and 91.
Yeah, that's true. So can we talk about you brought up her roommate character, and this is something I was thinking about as I was watching it last night. Like, the whole movie is kind of constructed that Clarice is on her own. She's in an industry surrounded by men. That she is quite literally surrounded by men throughout most of the movie. And then you kind of have this roommate character that I don't even think we ever learn her name, but she's with her in several scenes. And I kind of felt, and as much as I don't want to support less women in films by saying that they shouldn't have had that character, I kind of felt like they shouldn't have had that character. I mean, I think it really would have sold what they were going for more if, like, it's literally just her on her own figuring this stuff out. I don't know if anyone agrees with me on that one.
Yeah, well, she feels like a plot device, and basically the second half, or I guess last 30 minutes or so of the movie, because that's basically when she comes into play to basically say, hey, guess what, there's a phone call for you, or hey, aren't you worried about Hannibal Lecter? And that she's kind of there to help move along the narrative story. And it seemed like at points she was there so that they could get away with not having to jump into like narration or anything, because the main person she bounces off is Jodie Foster, like, hey, let's talk about what you're feeling or what you're thinking right now.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, it seems, I haven't read the book. I've always wanted to. I don't know why I haven't read it, probably just because I expect it to be disturbing. But it seemed like they were just taking scenes where they were like, well, we need to know what's happening in Clarice's head here, so we're just going to have another character have a dialogue with her. And they did kind of handcuff themselves. You know, we just talked about all the imagery and undertones of masculine power and how bad that can be. And then the flip side of that is that they can't really allow themselves to have any women characters who are not strong. Like even the woman in the well basically is making moves to protect herself by capturing the dog and everything.
Yeah.
So by having this auxiliary female character, they have to basically say, like, look, this other FBI woman trainee is also better than all the other men who are just full of bravado. That kind of seems to be the logic there, to me at least.
Yeah, it just seems like for a film that's so expertly, like, just through imagery explains exactly what's going on and what they're trying to say, that just having another character that serves as just an exposition machine basically is just, like, not creative and not intelligent filmmaking. Like, that really got to me this time. And I'm probably just being too picky because I'm trying to be devil's advocate over here, but...
You really do dislike exposition more than anyone I've ever met.
I really do. It's a visual media. Tell the story visually. But, so, Adrian, let's go ahead and let the other shoe drop and be a little negative here. Because I think the thing that you and I really agreed with is that the first two acts of this film are incredible, and yes. I think it goes off the rails on the third act. And I'm about to insult a movie that won 5 Academy Awards, but Hannibal's escape scene is far too long. And I should have written down exactly how long it was, but it felt like it just went on forever. And
it's about 5 to 7 minutes, yeah. I'd say.
And it's like, I'm not saying it's not well shot. It is absolutely well shot. It's exciting, like the reveal that he was actually the cop wearing the cop's face the entire time. That's cool, but it feels like we just take a break for 10 minutes and move into sort of another film when Clarice is supposed to be the focal point, and the movie is hers. It's about her. It's about her growth. It's about her pushing against these men in a male-dominated profession and coming into her own. And it just, like, his escape scene could have been done, like, you didn't have to show it. He escaped. Like, that's all that matters is Hannibal gets out. And, like, the fact that she's not even worried about that he's going to come after her because she knows him so well. Like, that's all you need. Like, I don't know. Adrian, I know you agree with me on this. Does anyone else?
No.
No,
Not at all.
no. I was thinking of so many reasons why I disagree that I can't remember them all now.
Well, that's
But,
convenient.
So it's part of it's because you're looking at you already knowing that he escaped. It's a little tedious, but you have to think of it. The first time you saw it, that was an amazing scene. There's all this just slow build, just slow build, and it is odd because you have your main protagonist and antagonist are just gone. It's they're just not on the screen. Doesn't cut to them. They're completely gone. But that is an amazing amount of pressure building, and you almost forget that the other officer is in the ambulance at the time, until he pulls his face off his face. So I think it's just a wonderful scene. I mean, it's odd and it's a little jarring that it's a very different pacing from the rest of the movie, but still, I think it's perfectly shot.
To me, I think it's 50-50 because the actual event of him escaping from the cell and the violence therein, just how that builds, that's great. And then when you find out, that he is wearing the other guard's mask or face as a mask, is great too. But everything that's kind of in the middle there for a bit, when we go down and we see the police officers in the lobby and we go through their whole little thing, when we know he's gotten away, there's a couple minutes in there that I think they could have taken out, that there's several shots that just languish longer than anything else in the movie. And it's fine to still have it and everything, but there's just all that extra bit when you're in the lobby with them and they're saying, hey, look, the elevator's going up. And then they stand there for about 30 seconds and they go, hey, look, the elevator went back to that floor. It just felt like it was drawing it out a bit more than it should have been.
I don't know.
And I mean, maybe Chad has a good point that this is because we knew the scene was going to play out this way. But I just, my biggest problem is not, like, I think you're right. Technically, this is all done really well, I think. But I just, at the end of the day, like, it's well shot, it's well done. Where does it fall into the overall story besides Hannibal gets out?
I mean, I think you do need a narrative break. I don't think it's a sin to have a bit of a narrative break where you know, I don't remember what scene happens exactly right before this scene, but if I recall, it's a scene where Clarice is like going somewhere, and so it makes sense that it's like, okay, well, you're either going to sort of follow Clarice on her journey, or you're going to just have like a slightly awkward cut where she like gets in a car and then is suddenly at her destination, or you can do this thing where the camera goes somewhere else, and like, yeah, it could go back to Buffalo Bill, but really, like, Hannibal is, I've heard the term contagonist before. I don't know if that's a standard term that other people know about, or if this is just a weird thing that I found on the internet one day. But because Hannibal's not the antagonist, Buffalo Bill's the antagonist.
Right.
Hannibal is not really on the good guy's side, but he's driving the good guy's plot forward in sort of a push and pull fashion. And you really do, like you as the viewer, especially the first time, like Chad said, you're like so interested in Hannibal. Hannibal, especially the way Hopkins portrays him, is like the most interesting thing you've ever seen, and you're like fascinated and you can't look away, but you want to look away, type of thing. And again, the first time you see it, like, you're sort of being told by the movie, like, this guy is the scariest thing that you've ever seen, but the movie's being very coy about it up until this point. The movie does things like they show Clarice the photo of the nurse whose face he mauled, but they don't show you the picture. Mm-hmm. So you really have only been told how scary Hannibal is. And in order for Hannibal's scariness to really come across to you as the movie viewer, like Scott said, it's a visual medium. You need to see it at some point. To address the comments about all the several minutes maybe where they're standing around watching the elevator move up and down, I think maybe, I guess I'll agree that on rewatches that is a little tedious. But I think the first time, I would venture that most viewers were not thinking that was tedious. I'll bet that was just, nail biting, basically. Because again, the order of the scene I don't have perfectly firm in my mind, but you haven't even seen what he did to the guards yet. You just know that he did something horrible to them. And so there's so many things that you're tense about. You're like, okay, is Hannibal alive? Did he get shot? What was that gunshot? What did he do to the guards? What did he do to the other guard? What happened up there? There's so many questions in your mind that I think it's actually appropriate to have that much slow burn to kind of let all those ramifications go in your head while you're sitting there.
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go around in circles, but
yeah, I mean, I think, it's totally fair to say that we had different responses to this scene.
Yeah.
And
I do like what you said, that Hannibal is the driving force of the plot. He is what moves the plot forward. He's Clarice's plot device to help her figure out new parts of the case. And in that, from that perspective, this scene does nothing to advance the plot. And I'm not saying Hannibal shouldn't escape. I'm not saying there shouldn't have been a scene where Hannibal escapes, but to break away from the advancing force of the movie for that long to something that really at the end of the day has no bearing on the final act of the film. He's already given her the advice that she needs to figure things out. She already is just processing the information. I don't know. And I agree it's a good scene. I just don't know if it belongs here. Is my point.
It's interesting because this movie's kind of hard to classify. Like, sometimes I almost feel tempted to call it a horror movie, or or is it a thriller, or is it a detective movie? It's got lots of different elements, but like it's definitely trying to disturb you. It's trying to disturb you more than, like, I would say a typical detective story is trying to disturb you. Yeah. So it's got horror elements.
I'd say that it's a thriller procedural because it does have some of those horror elements, but like you said, it wants to give you that thrilling aspect because you don't really have any violence or anything too graphic up until that point, which is why the plus of the escape scene is that you do have that brutality and anger coming out of Hannibal that, like you guys mentioned, had only been talked about before that point. But up until that point, there's so many procedural elements that they're going along with that you have your basic police detective type story that has those thriller elements that are very much from the, I guess the best way to describe it would be like airport paperback type style of it, that they have it in there to spice things up and to keep you going along and keep you hooked with everything that's going on. Because at the time the movie came out and everything had it just been a police procedural, people would have been bored to tears. So you have that more thrilling aspect pushing it over that edge, keeps everybody on the edge of their seat. And then with throwing in the way that it's filmed, you keep everybody attentive the whole time.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think I agree. So I want to move on to sound really quick. And I know I'm trying to sandwich my complaints between compliments. The sound in this film is incredible. I'm not just talking about Howard Shore's score, which is great, but the sound effect and some of the Foley work, the breathing that is really focused on, and the mix like pushes the breathing to the forefront of the soundtrack. It's so good, and it's part of, there's a lot of camera tricks and a lot of directorial tricks that Demme uses in this film to make it creepy, but the sound on its own, like even the opening, which I think is like the opening of this movie is incredible, just Clarice running through the obstacle course, and I think a lot of that is just how to the forefront her breathing is mixed in with Shore's score. It's so good. What did you guys think about the sound? Adrian, go first. I should, with this many people, I need to say names.
No, I don't really have any issues with sound. There's parts where I really appreciated it being muted and not having things be overdone or having the swell of music to convey everything, and having it being more muted and having the actions of the actors and what was going on be what moved things along, and having very subtle little twinges of sound here and there to play upon things, or just the way echoes or sound seems to bounce off every room and linger just a little bit in the distance, that you can hear something that's going on that gives a sense of life outside of that frame that you're seeing.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really noticed this time around was when the moth cocoon is taken out of the girl's mouth, there's this like sigh noise that's played, and it's like, I mean, she's obviously dead. It's not coming from her. It's just this like audible sigh, and it's so creepy and weird, and it just like adds so much to that moment. And I loved it. I loved it so much.
Yeah. Speaking of breathing sounds, I'm pretty sure there's a scene where Hannibal is like strapped down somewhere, and he's just doing his like dead reptile eye thing, not really saying or reacting to anything, but you just hear his very like steady hiss of breathing throughout the whole scene. I think Dr. Chilton is like talking, but even while Dr. Chilton's talking, you hear the breathing.
Yeah. They definitely, I mean, the mix definitely pushed breath forward in every instance where it was, especially like at the end when she's alone in the dark. The breathing, both her breathing and Buffalo Bill's breathing, as we're seeing things from his, first person perspective through the night vision, is definitely elevated to the forefront of the soundtrack.
Yeah,
it's done very well.
Yeah, and I guess that reminds me. I think it is the sound that really sells the moment where Bill pulls back the hammer on the pistol, and like the sound of that is amplified like 1,000-fold on the soundtrack, and it makes it really clear to you, the viewer, that Clarice is reacting to that sound. And I see that as being, largely a sound design phenomenon.
So I guess we haven't talked about the acting, guys. Which, I mean, both these actors won Academy Awards, so we should talk about the acting. Let's start with Anthony Hopkins, because I think he's easy in that this performance is incredible. Absolutely incredible. Does anyone have any complaints about it? I can't imagine that would be true, but
at times I thought it's a little over the top with some of the. He really likes to kind of flash his eyes a lot, and after rewatching, I realized that he's on the screen for I think 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. It's very minimal, so he's making a ton out of it. Which something I was thinking about is that's why the sequel Hannibal wasn't good, is because you got too much of it. Versus when you have in just these 15 minutes out of 2 hours, it's like your first selection, and I believe it was the first selection, the Kryptonian Club. It's the Shark and Jaws. You don't get much of it. It's not the same giant reveal at the end, but you get very little of him, and it just makes. Just choose scenery while standing still, or being strapped down. So I think really you couldn't see anyone else in the role, or at least at the time.
Yeah.
Well, I'll argue to it. I like it's so weird, Anthony Hopkins' performance to me, because I both like it, and I was glad that he mentioned that it was showy, because there's points that I felt he went too far, and then there's points where he pulls back. So it was I enjoyed it and disliked it at the same time. And I was somebody who, when I saw this movie, I saw it after I had seen Manhunter for the first time, which is of course based on Red Dragon that Michael Mann did, and Brian Cox plays Hannibal Lecter in that, and is a lot more subdued, and you can tell that he's very much playing on kind of a creepy level where he's manipulating the characters subtly. He's getting under their skin and he's twisting them that way. And he's got even less times than Anthony Hopkins. So that's why it's weird for somebody who's very drawn back and subdued. And then you've got Anthony Hopkins, who's completely over the top.
Yeah, I almost read his over the topness being Anthony Hopkins is playing Hannibal, who's playing a character of his own, and like he's being over the top on purpose to scare everyone and to make everyone uncomfortable and to manipulate them. Like I think like the famous scene that he ate his liver with fava beans and a Chianti, like the noise he makes is absolutely over the top. It's ridiculous, but it's almost like he's doing it intentionally. That's Hannibal acting in order to make her uncomfortable.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
So it worked okay for me because of that.
I really like that interpretation, Scott. Ever since I heard Anthony Hopkins make some comments about preparing for this role, I've had the opinion that his take on Hannibal is that Hannibal is basically like a reptile who is wearing the face of a man and trying to act like a man as well as he can, but he's basically just like an alligator or like a viper or something that is completely remorseless and just has no human connection. So anytime you see him being over the top is just the reptile trying to, and he's obviously, super intelligent, like far more intelligent than a normal person. So he can kind of run circles around people, but he's just really weird.
Yeah.
And also, like, I think he does a great job of being a very enigmatic villain. And like everyone mentioned, the low screen time, kind of like Darth Vader. Like Darth Vader is great because he's enigmatic, and you kind of want to know more about him. You always want to know more about Hannibal. You always want to know more about Darth Vader, and the trick is that the movie doesn't give you any more, and that's why it works, I think.
Yeah, and I like Chad's point about that's the reason why Hannibal, the sequel, doesn't really work. I mean, I think that's one of the many reasons. I think that movie went a little too ridiculous with the gore and was trying to gross you out rather than just creep you out. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed his performance here. Chad, I think when we were watching it, you mentioned the scene where he starts doing the accent was like improvisation.
Absolutely. When he imitates Agent Starling's accent, and the look on her face is just very, very shocked. And from what I understand, they had opposing cameras, and that's her actual reaction because she thought Anthony Hopkins was mocking her accent, which was decent mockery because it's not very good Southern accent, but like it's really effective. It's the way he kind of attacks her at her base.
Oh, Agent Starling, you think you can dissect me with this blunt little tool?
No. I thought that your knowledge...
You're so ambitious, aren't you? Do you know what you look like to me with your good bag and your cheap shoes? You look like a rube. A well-scrubbed, hustling rube with a little taste. Good nutrition's given you some length of bone, but you're not more than one generation from poor white trash, are you, Agent Starling? And that accent you've tried so desperately to shed, pure West Virginia. What does your father do? Is he a coal miner? Does he stink of the land? You know how quickly the boys found you, all those tedious, sticky fumblings in the backseats of cars, while you could only dream of getting out, getting anywhere, getting all the way to the apple pie.
Thinking about her accent, he even brings up, like, you're trying to lose your accent. And one of my biggest issues is that it kind of comes in and out. Mm-hmm. But that might be because it could be intentional. That's an intention by Jodie Foster to think, well, she wants to get rid of her West Virginia accent, but if she's nervous, if she's excited, it's gonna come back. So that might have been an actual choice. So I may have to forgive her for it.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say. I was just going to say, like, well, maybe we can give Jodie Foster the benefit of the doubt and say maybe she's intentionally acting a bad accent because that's her interpretation of someone trying to lose their accent. But I don't really know. I can't say I've known a lot of Virginians, so I don't have a good basis for a Virginian accent.
Yeah.
But
Sorry, go
no,
ahead.
I was just gonna say that I do think it was an acting choice, because that's part of the big push and pull with her, is her wanting to shed that kind of old skin of that West Virginia part of her and be taken more seriously with joining the FBI. She doesn't go into the same form of law enforcement that her dad does, because she wants to attain higher than that. She wants to get to the best place that she can, but she knows that where she comes from and who her family was might be holding her back in the eyes of everyone. And she knows that she's already going to be on everyone's radar because they see her as cute or pretty and they're judging her in that way. So that's why she has that push and pull. And they even make sure to focus on her car when she's leaving where Hannibal is at first when she's going out. And they make sure to have the tight shot showing that her car is completely different than everyone else that's around. It's an older model, it's ratty, and it's part of her old life that she's trying to kind of get rid of so she can be taken more seriously.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I think a lot of her best acting in this movie, I mean, it's pretty much across the board, but a lot of like how terrified she looks while she's doing certain things, like going through Buffalo Bill's house. It's so authentic seeming that it's invisible, if that makes sense. Like I'm only noticing it in my mind right now because I'm trying to like search through and think like, well, what are some parts of that movie where she did good acting? And the fact is, I've never noticed her doing good acting because that's how good it is, if that makes sense. Like she's just being exactly how a person would be in that situation, even if it's something completely incredible and extreme.
Yeah, it's really good, and I think the direction, and not to take anything away from Jodie Foster, but the direction amplifies all of it because it makes her seem so small in every situation. The way they angle the camera. I also like how whenever she's in danger, like we are, like when the door first opens, we're already on the inside looking at her standing in the outside when she gets to Buffalo Bill's house. Like it's almost voyeuristic on how the camera follows her around, and it's like it makes her seem so powerless and small. Like I love the scene as much as I really didn't like the third act of this movie when she confronts Bill for the first time and takes out her gun. Like even though she's got a gun on him, there is no moment in that scene where you think she's actually in charge of that situation. She's completely seems completely in over her head at that point. And that's a lot of because Demme's direction here is done so well, and the cinematography is so good.
Yeah, isn't she even wearing like a giant coat that makes her look like a child?
Yeah.
Like her dad's clothes or something. And yeah, I think that all feeds into the subconscious impression that she's a little girl, basically.
Yeah, and she sheds that jacket right before she goes in the basement, and she goes from looking kind of imposing to looking just, you see how small she is. I mean, I think she's a relatively short person. She's like 5'2", 5'3". She was in her late 20s at the time, but she looks straight out of high school, college. She looks like a little girl chasing a monster down the basement. It's really affecting. And also, just at that point in the film, I think if you're watching, you don't really care about Buffalo Bill. You care about her being okay. Which there's just been this, hour and a half buildup of, learning about who she is, what she's doing, why she's doing it. You see her father's funeral, all these little things that build up to where you want her to catch the bad guy and you hope that she gets Catherine, but you mostly want her to be okay at that point.
Yeah, and I like the way the film is structured in that, like, the identity of Buffalo Bill is not a mystery to us, the viewer. And I think that's good because that's not the important part of the story. Like, finding out who Buffalo Bill is from our perspective is not important. It's her being able to overcome this difficulty and being able to grow as a person. And I like that it didn't hinge on anything. Like, and I think you're right, and that's why we don't care at the end. We're worried about her because we've been with Bill the whole time. We know his deal, as fucked up as it is, but we're with her throughout that all. And I wanted to talk about that scene where she goes down into the basement because I did like how that echoed her first encounter with Hannibal. Like to meet both these people, she has to go down a lot of stairs and travel into an underworld basically, where Hannibal's locked up in a cage, but Bill's also in his own sort of dungeon. and I like how those scenes echo each other. And I also like how, like, I felt like when she first met Hannibal, there was an air she was putting off of how she was in control, but she really wasn't. And I felt like while in the scene where she was in the kitchen, she really looked weak and overwhelmed. When she does make the decision to go down in the basement, you see her kind of take charge of the situation. And that flips on her a little bit when the lights go out. But I like how those echo.
Yeah. So the two naysayers here. What is the point at which you think the movie goes off the rails or loses the standard of greatness that it holds up for the first part? Because I don't like in my mind, I'm just like, man, it does not let up for me. It does not like become any worse at any point. It's just perfect all the way through. So, you know, is there some inflection point?
I really think it's Hannibal's escape. I mean, I know we've talked about this a bunch, but I really think at that point the movie starts to kind of lose me a little bit.
Okay, and then after that, it's kind of does it keep making bad decisions after that, or does it just not recover from that stumble in your mind?
I just think, like, I mean, I enjoy the end of the movie, but I think like the camera work, and this is ironic because I've just been talking about how good it is, but some of the things that made the first half really great for me, I think it kind of steps off of a little bit. I don't know, Adrian, what do you think?
Yeah, they definitely. If it's not the actual escape itself, it's the fact that when Hannibal exits the film, it feels like it's deflated in a sense, which is sad to say because Jodie Foster's doing such a great job for the majority of it, but it has a different feel to it. Everything feels kind of a little bit more laxed in that it's kind of stumbling around as things go, and it to me it doesn't have as strong as a focus because when they were jumping away from Jodie Foster, not only did they have Bill, but they also had Hannibal himself. And so then they start going to Scott Glenn and seeing what the police are doing. And it's just not really interesting. And it doesn't really, it doesn't have that same level of height that you're getting before. And so, and you just get kind of a jumble of some weird scenes, like when you have Scott Glenn on the aircraft and he's calling Jodie Foster and he's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. We found out the guy, blah, 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 blah. We're going to the place right now." And that, it just feels weird. And then 2 seconds later, it gets better when you have them going into the house that they think he's in and contrasting that with Jodie Foster going into the house where he is. But she kind of stumbles on to Bill. It's not like she pieced it together and she's like, "Oh, maybe this is the lead." It's just, "Oh, I need to go and talk to this person so I can get more notes to try to get in his head and find things." And she kind of stumbles into him, and they have the weird shot of Scott Glenn where Scott Glenn just happens to know, oh no, Jodie Foster.
I hated that so much.
It's just like, that's not the conclusion. Why? How would he know?
Yeah,
how
exactly.
would he know?
There's no one here, Jack. Clarice.
Like, I almost don't like the trickery they pull with the empty house and the comparison shots. I almost think that's like just a stupid movie trick that I don't think it needs. Like, I appreciate how it's shot, and I think it's technically done well. But I don't know. It's just like, we got you, viewers. Like, we tricked you. You thought that was the one house, but no, it's not. I don't know. Like, I think it would have been just fine for Clarice to just show up there without all the trickery.
I think you could still have the trickery without Scott Glenn having that little reaction. That's what kind of pops the balloon to me. Like I said, the way they shoot it and everything is a lot tighter than the couple minutes that preceded. But once you get to that, him having that reaction, that's what made me go, oh.
And that's actually a good point, because there are several points in the movie that I think, and I don't know if these were notes from the studio or something, but the movie starts to think we're really stupid. Like, I think this is a very intelligent movie that requires you paying attention to. But then there are moments like that where, like, they were almost telegraphing to us that Clarice is now in danger. And then there was another moment where Hannibal has stolen the pen piece, and like they take the time to show that that the pen is now missing. We saw him eye it. We saw the pen is now missing. But like Chad was talking about earlier, we need this scene where you see Hannibal take out the pen and then put it in his hand, and there's this like super exaggerated zoom in on the pen piece in his hand. And I'm like, we get it, movie. Like, he has the, like, I don't even know if we need that. Like we've seen the pen. We've seen that the pen is now missing. We're smart. We can piece this stuff together. But almost like the movie doesn't trust us to be able to, and has to do this super exaggerated zoom. Say, hey, this is what's happening. By the way,
I have no issues with that, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I can absolutely see why that bothers you, but people are pretty dumb. And I can easily see people being like, how did he get out? How did he magically get out of the handcuffs? Yeah. If all you showed them was the pen. Like, I bet all four of us would have been like, oh, the pen. Yeah, he's using the pen. But nitpickers are going to be like, well, how did he hide the pen in this scene? And how did he get it from where was it? Where was the pen? It's like, okay, look, it was in his mouth, and then he transferred it to his hand, and he hit it, and there. Now that question is never going to come up.
And I don't have a problem.
They've got a scene that's worse than that, I feel, for earlier on, though, and it's the part that we haven't really talked about, because I actually like when they get to the scene, but how they get to the scene is what bothers me, and it's the storage locker. And it's one of the things that throws me off in the movie, because there's a couple different times where it feels like the time jumps are kind of haphazard, that just all of a sudden they occur, and you're not really sure like how much time has passed. Has it been like a day or a couple hours since things have happened? Because there's a point where Crawford calls up Starling and it's like, oh, hey, how'd you or how's it going with the stuff that you were looking up? How's that lead? And she goes, oh, yeah, I completely forgot to tell you. I'm sorry. But it turns out that Hannibal was really smart and gave me this clue. And I looked in the phone book, and it turns out that he was telling me about this storage unit. And then cut to, she's at the storage unit. It just felt kind of a little weird to me.
I thought it was like how she figured out the name of the storage unit was really, really strange. That just like, oh, it didn't seem like he would use language like that. So I looked up, I forget, what was the name of the storage unit? I can't remember.
I think it's yourself.
Yeah.
Yes. Like,
I just thought that was very thin and kind of like so I figured it out, and there just happened to be a yourself storage.
Well, yeah, I think it's 1991. She picked up a Yellow Pages, flipped to Y, found it, yourself storage.
Why would, okay, that's fine.
You have to forgive it. This was a quarter century ago.
So Hannibal used the phrase yourself, and she decided after talking to him once, that would be a really strange phrase for him to use. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that one, Adrian. The other thing that gets me, and this is me really quibbling, but so this movie is called Silence of the Lambs. There's the scene where Clarice reveals that the nightmare she has is of the lamb screaming. And then, and this is getting back to my hatred of exposition, but Hannibal then proceeds to explain what the metaphor means to the audience about how her saving the lamb, like she joined the FBI because she just wants, if she can save one person, if she can save this one girl from Buffalo Bill, then she'll feel like the nightmares will stop. And I'm like, that's again, like, I don't know if we need that explained to us by a character. I think we can reason that out on our own. And like I said, I haven't read the book. Maybe the same thing happens in the book, but I don't know. I just didn't like how spelled out the main metaphor of the film was.
You still wake up sometimes, don't you? You wake up in the dark and hear the screaming of the lambs.
Yes.
And you think if you save poor Catherine, you could make them stop, don't you? You think if Catherine lives, you won't wake up in the dark ever again to that awful screaming of the lambs.
I don't know.
This is another I'm on my own.
But he's a psychiatrist, so he can say those things.
Like he's trying. Also, it's Anthony Hopkins. I think we're just happy to have him speaking at the time.
Okay, that's fine. Like I said, like all my complaints with this movie have nothing to do with the technical nature of it. Like like cinematically, that was a well constructed scene. The performances were great. I don't know. I want the movie. I don't want the movie to think I'm dumb. And sometimes I felt like this movie thought I was dumb.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think it's almost just like differing senses of aesthetics and stylistic preferences, because stuff like that doesn't bother me. I was trying to construct some kind of labored metaphor while you were talking, where basically this is going to be terrible, but I'm going to go for it anyway.
All right.
It's like saying, like, I don't like Dante's Inferno because I don't really like poetry, and it's like, well, but Dante's Inferno is poetry. So, like, if you're going to pick that thing to not like about it, maybe just set that aside or something. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it's a lot of the things the movie does are heavily stylized. Like, it's a heavily stylized movie in a lot of different ways. And, you know, on the nose illustrations of things, like the camera very deliberately showing you things and characters very deliberately stating things. It is a thing that happens several times in the movie. And I see that as stylistic choices. And prior to this conversation, it never occurred to me that that was the movie being like, well, people are dumb, so let's make sure that they don't miss this. I thought that was just the style they were going for, was just like the camera is sort of this omniscient, in terms of the shots, like the camera is this omniscient eye, and the eye is showing you what you need to see. And, you know, and then in terms of the dialogue, I think that's just kind of all of the dialogue. Everything Hannibal says is extremely overwrought anyway, so him explaining the metaphor doesn't necessarily, again, yeah, I'm not like arguing because there's no point in that. I think all I'm pointing out is, like, yeah, I think all four of us probably have slightly different aesthetic tastes when it comes to these things.
No, and I definitely see your point. I do. I just think that there are so many things this movie does subtly well. Like, just, we were talking about how well it frames the conversations with the camera, with people looking at Clarice, and it's something that kind of calls attention to itself, but I think most people that watch this movie might completely miss that. They just know that they feel some sense of dread and they can't identify where it comes from. So I appreciate all the subtle work it's doing, that when I see stuff that's very, very not subtle, it's jarring to me.
Yeah, fair enough.
And honestly, I think those had to be very specifically made choices, because if you go, like, back to the storage unit, you know, there's this terrifying scene. You know, she's just cloaked in black and just darkness. You can't see anything. There's some first-person shots. It's very unsettling. And the big reveal is her pulling a sheet off of a head. And they could have done that, like, zoom in, yank it off, you know, basically like a jump scare. But it's very subtle, pulls it off, and just brings it in tighter. I think it's more about the kind of building dread. So I think with the, you know, other than the close up of Scott Glenn's face saying "Starling," that does bother me a little bit. But overall, I just think you're being picky and smug, Scott.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm gonna call you smug every time I guest on your show.
I am definitely gonna vote yes for your movie now.
Hey, it's all right, because you respect honesty.
No, and I recognize. Look, we could talk for hours about this movie, and I truly do think it's remarkable, and I fully recognize. I think when you get to movies this well made, when you are trying to find things to speak negatively about it, you do get down into really small, kind of nitpicky things. I don't think any of that ruins the movie. Anything that I've complained about, I don't think ruins the movie. I think the movie absolutely accomplishes what it set out to do. But yeah, there's definitely moments that I did not like, and I was almost kind of happy for that, because I didn't want this to just be another conversation where we're all just talking about how amazing this film is, because I like to have some discussion and arguments on this. So, I mean, I think we did that. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about before we move into our vote?
I would like to mention that I'm fairly sure this is the only Best Picture winner to drop the C-bomb.
That's true.
I've done enough research yet, but I'm 99% sure.
To win. I think there's been a couple that have been nominated.
Yeah.
And people who've been nominated for dropping that, because that was years ago in the early aughts. I remember proclaiming to somebody that the only reason that Clive Owen was nominated for for an Academy Award is because he called because he called Julia Roberts a C word.
Oh, that's true.
And I was like, that's it. He got to do that in a movie, and he pulled it off. And people were like, that's fantastic. No one's done that in 30 years.
I guess one thing that we've kind of steered away from the controversy here, but one thing that, Chad, you brought up last night, this movie has a man who they very specifically in the film say that he is not transsexual. He's doing this because he hates himself and he's trying to move himself as far away from him as possible. But with the way the world has changed these days, do we think that this film could or would get made today? There was a backlash when this came out in '91, so I can't imagine now how well this would be received.
I honestly don't think you could. I mean, having if is transgendered or whatever he is, serial killer who's hunting heavyset women, I think, and like seeing the results of what he does, actual dead bodies, and showing them. I mean, you can destroy cities; it's fine. Just you use the F word once, kill people bloodlessly, and people are fine with it. I think there's the amount of reality to it. I think people would not enjoy. I don't think any studio would greenlight it personally. Would much less put a Shakespearean actor, a famous Oscar-winning actress at the time, together to do it. I don't think it would happen, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they'd have to. Sorry, go ahead.
No, Matt. I wanted to hear what Matt had to say first.
Oh, yeah. I think I was just going to say that they would have to find some other kind of psychosexual thing to make the movie about. I mean, Sam Harris, is that his name? The author?
Thomas Harris.
Thomas Harris. Yeah, man, I got my Harrises mixed up again. He, all of his books are about sort of very interestingly, insane characters. Like Red Dragon is, sort of a unique twist on what it is. Hannibal is obviously a very unique character, and the Buffalo Bill character is a very unique character. So I mean, they probably could have made this movie fairly close to the way it is without the he's making a woman suit element. It could have just been, he's a serial killer who kills women. But yeah, no, I agree. They probably wouldn't. It would just be, it would be toxic to make a movie like that. Now it would just be. I mean, can you imagine how Twitter would react?
Film Twitter would go crazy.
I mean,
you could have made it 5 years ago, or maybe 5 years from now. But right now, definitely a big no-no.
Yeah, or Tumblr for that matter.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think the transformation portion of it is so important to the film because it's Clarice's transformation. But yeah, maybe they could move that in a different kind of transformation, not the man transforming to a woman thing. Maybe they could do something different with it. But yeah,
they could have just ripped off the Red Dragon character and had him. He thinks he's transforming into a dragon.
Yeah,
by
that's true.
Killing families. So I mean, it doesn't have to make any sense whatsoever, actually.
Yeah, I think it falls both on a yes or no, that you could find a way to work in the elements that you have, but it's some of the phrasing that they have, and it's partially having Hannibal's dismissal and the way that he mentions it and compares it to something that he's trying on, basically. And because we don't get into a lot of Bill's background, we don't see a lot of what goes on with him. We don't know him outside of these elements when he's preparing the women and everything, that we don't know a lot about his psychological state. Is this something that is really important to him, or is it something else? Is it a symptom of a whole bunch of other stuff? But then at the same time, with the serial killer that Thomas Harris was pulling from with the suit and everything, you can easily still have that direction, because you've got Ed Gein, and Ed Gein is who he's taken that from, because Ed Gein was a famous serial killer who, of course, killed people and took pieces of their body to make a human suit, basically, that he wore around, and was a really crazy dude. But you could go easily in that direction because you're already pulling from pre-existing serial killers, and you could go more in that vein and still have that element to it.
Yeah, that's true. I think you're right. I think the dismissal of it, and the kind of the holding up as, oh, he's not really transgender, he's just messed up in the head, is a dangerous place to go, because there could arguments made that people would say, oh, that's all transgender people, which obviously I do not believe is true at all. But I mean, there would be those arguments made. So yeah, I mean, times have changed since 1991. So. And on a bigger question, would this movie even be made in a world where rated R mid-level budget movies don't even really exist anymore?
Yeah, I think that's a bigger reason why it wouldn't. It's a big investment of capital for a non-guaranteed return.
Yeah.
Especially with television, what it's become in the last 25 years. You look at lots of the police procedural shows and everything, and even with us just having Hannibal for the past 3 years on TV, one single 40-minute episode of that show was far more graphic and over the top compared to anything in Silence of the Lambs. And the fact that you can turn on TV basically any night in the fall and spring and find a police procedural show that covers lots of the same ground that was being done at the time of this movie. When this movie came out in 1991, you were just starting to ramp up on those type of shows. Law and Order came out in 1990, I want to say, was the first year. Homicide: Life on the Street.
Did you just pull that from memory?
Yeah.
Wow. You couldn't pay me $1 million to know when Law and Order started.
I made a bad Law and Order joke earlier today on Twitter, so it's already on my mind. But you had Homicide: Life on the Streets that was coming out at that time too. So when this show came out, they were tapping into something that people were starting to become interested in, but it wasn't so saturated and all over the place to cloud it. If they made this movie nowadays, it would have to be a lot more violent. It would have to be a lot more over the top. It would have to be a lot more showy, and you'd have to draw back on those technical aspects that we really appreciate from the film.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. All right, so let's do it. Let's do the vote. Matt, I'm going to start with you because I think I already know what you're going to say.
Well, you really had to work hard to convince me, but I'm going to vote yes. I want this movie in the Kryptonian Collection.
All right, that's one. Adrian, go.
I'm going to feel horrible saying it, but I have to be completely honest, and I'm going to say no. And the only reason I'm saying no is because that last 30 minutes of the movie flips so much to take me out of it. If I'm doing like on a basic rating scale, this is a 4 out of 5 star movie because that technical aspect and everything is so high on it. But because it has that flip with that 30-minute point, that it feels like it's deflated to me, that that takes away from the value of being able to look at it over and over and over, and putting it in that collection of having those movies that you want to rewatch. That's unfortunately it's a demerit to me. I will still say that it's a fantastic and great movie, and from the technical aspects, everything's great. It's just that pulling the wind out of the sails basically, unfortunately, does it in for me.
Man, I was really hoping that I wouldn't have to be the deciding vote. So I think one of the fun things about this is us defining what is Kryptonian Collection worthy, because I think we've left it intentionally nebulous, so we could kind of define it as we go. I think this movie, from a pure technical aspect, is a masterpiece. I think Jonathan Demme, what he did with this movie was great. I can't imagine a better version of this movie being made with a different director. So from a technical aspect, even though I agree with Adrian on the end of the movie kind of deflating and losing some of the greatness that I thought was in the beginning, I am going to vote yes. because this movie was so beautifully shot, so wonderfully done, that I need people to watch this movie and love it that haven't. So I want to draw attention to it. So I'm voting yes. So that's 2 versus 1. So,
Fantastic.
So Chad, you just won.
So I don't have to come back next week with another submission, because I was going to come back with the Ghostbusters reboot, and then you couldn't say anything negative about it. So,
I actually haven't seen it.
Oh.
I haven't seen it yet. I was in New York, so I didn't get to watch any movies last weekend.
I'm sure it's fantastic.
I'm gonna see it tomorrow, maybe. We'll see. Have you seen it, Adrian? We're getting completely off the rails, but
yeah. I saw it. It's fun. I think that it could have been better had they done away with a lot of the fan service that they have in there and the winking and nods to the previous movies, since they made such a big deal about having the all-female cast, having it be very much standing on its own, but then having all the winking and nudging that they have. I will say that I'm really excited for a second movie when they do put it out, because I think they'll be able to go further away and do whatever they want with the movie now that they have it basically out of their system. And all the Ghost Bros out of there will not check in anyway. So,
Scott, do you want to know what Red Letter Media thought? Or
no,
would you like
I haven't watched. Okay. I know they probably hated it. I know how they work.
No comment.
I will watch it after I see the movie. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it is a little ironic that I heard this from you, and I heard it from other people, that the worst parts of the movie are the fact where it's trying desperately to call back to the first one, considering all the hatred that stemmed from this movie existing was how they were ruining the first one. So I think that's a little ironic, but I will.
It is a wilted olive branch.
All right. I can't, like, in our excitement to talk about Pokemon Go last week, Matt, I completely forgot that Ghostbusters was coming out, and we should have had a Ghostbusters episode, but there's still always time for that, to talk about the 1984 Ghostbusters. Yeah. I wish someone would nominate that for the Kryptonian Collection.
Hint.
Anyway, Chad, Silence of the Lambs is in. You have succeeded, so you will temporarily take over as a council member if you want to. You don't have to.
Fantastic.
So someone has to nominate a movie that Chad hates so we can listen to him. Because you've always been a positive voice on here. You came on and defended Lost. You came on and defended this movie. So I want to hear you rail on something.
What don't I like? Well, to make it easy on the listeners, if you want to win, choose anything with Nicolas Cage.
There's a lot of good.
There's a lot of good.
And one of them's already in. Yeah. Raising Arizona.
Oh, yeah. Well, if we want to keep the face pulling off motif going, someone could send in Face Off next week, and that's a hard yes.
Wow. I hope that happens, because I would love to talk about how terrible Face Off is.
I'll happily watch my Blu-ray and DVD copy of it the week of.
I want to see somebody throw out like Vampire's Kiss if we're doing Nicolas Cage.
Oh wow, yeah. So we're 3 for 3 now. I want to see some really weird movies get nominated.
Right.
I really want to see that happen.
Right. Like this isn't fun if people are going to suggest like Saving Private Ryan and The Godfather. Like I want to discuss movies that some of us are going to be like, why would you suggest that?
Yeah.
Batteries not included.
Oh wow. Oh wow. I will have words.
That's for a different show.
All right. So I think that's it for this week. We'll go ahead and wrap it up since it's getting late. Chad, thanks again for coming on and good nomination. I'm begrudgingly happy to have it in the collection, even though I was the swing vote. But Adrian, thanks for coming back. This just means now you get to nominate another movie in the coming months. And see if you can retain or re-obtain your position,
or light new fires.
Yeah, or that. Out of everyone we've had suggest movies, I have most faith in you picking obscure random things that we may or may not like.
I'll try my hardest.
All right, Matt. What are we doing next week?
I don't know.
I like to pop this on you and see if you can handle it without any prior planning or anything.
Well, I know what I'm going to recommend next week, but
Oh, okay.
it's not the same. That's not the question you asked. So,
well, are we ready? Adrian, you and I haven't talked about the new thing we're planning in enough detail to announce it yet, have we? Do you think?
I think we can. I mean,
Okay.
we still have time to hash out any bugs or anything.
Yeah, that's true. So, and Matt, you know about this. Chad, I don't think you do, but we are starting a new segment called Phantom Zoned, which is playing off of my Superman website name, because that's just, I'm gonna just go crazy with these.
Yep.
This like. I got 1,000 of them, so we can keep coming up with new things. I'm gonna have...
until you get a C&D.
Yeah. I mean, we're too small to get them now, but one day, hopefully, we become big enough to where DC Comics says, "Hey, stop it." But until that day comes, we're going to continue doing this. So the idea for Phantom Zone is kind of a reverse Kryptonian Collection, in that these are movies that are so bad or unworthy that we have to lock them away in the Phantom Zone, never to be seen by anyone ever again. So just think Adam Sandler, or Chappie, or or thousands of other movies. This isn't going to be like, I don't want it to be like a so bad it's good type of discussion. I want these to really be movies that have no kind of redeeming value to them at all.
They bring people pain.
Yes. So we haven't selected our movie for that yet, and we've still got to hash out exactly how that's going to work. But maybe we'll plan to do that over this week, and we can do our first one next week. Sorry. So that's what we got on the docket. Chad, do you have somewhere on the internet you can be found that you would like to share?
Yeah, you can. It's CACEVEDO 1982 on Twitter. So I'm sure no one got that.
It'll be in the show notes. Adrian, how about you?
I've got something that's gonna go up one of the next couple days, so I'll just shoot a thing on Twitter for it.
Sweet. What's your Twitter? We'll throw it in the show notes, but you can.
Yeah.
Matt, you are at more. Yeah.
Yeah. I would pick a new handle, but I have so many tweets invested in this one. Also, this is sort of my pan-internet handle, unfortunately. That's what happens when you pick your internet handle when you're like 14 and you're reading a fantasy novel. But that's me.
I'm not going to share what my AOL username was.
Yes, I know what it is. I can share it, but I won't.
Shit. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I am at ScottDaly85. That's DALY. Also, our website, Twitter, is at Daily Planet Films. You can find all information about what we're doing next on our podcast. We announce what the next Kryptonian Collection film is on there, so if you want to watch at home before you listen to the episodes, you can find that there. We will also announce the Phantom Zone stuff there, and maybe other places. And our website is dailyplanetfilms.com. So that's all we had this week, guys. Thanks for coming again. It was a good conversation, and welcome Silence of the Lambs to the Kryptonian Collection. And we will see you all next week.
Podcast is over. It's done. We hope you all had some fun. Go back to your work or your school. Maybe the gym. Hey, that's cool. Regardless, just go away. But please come back next